trying to prevent law-abiding citizens who can legally own a firearm from getting a firearm, it only serves to make those people who are good more vulnerable. I mean, Thomas Jefferson said it clearly. You can look that up. It's the reality that those kinds of laws only affect good people because good people follow the law. Bad people do not.
Joining us again at the New American here is Zoe Warren, who is no stranger to both the New American and also the interviews that we recently did. Zoe, welcome back again to the New American.
Hey, thank you, Christian. It's a pleasure and an honor, man. I'm so thankful to be, to have the opportunity to be interviewed. Thank you.
And of course, it's an honor and opportunity as well to speak with you on your campaign for Lieutenant Governor of South Carolina, which is why you're on today as the guest rather than the host. Of course, for those of you who are watching, if you have not watched 2A4 Today on the New American, be sure to watch those here in thenewamerican.com, where Zoe Warren discusses every facet of the Second Amendment and your right to keep and bear arms, your God-given right, as protected by the Bill of Rights. So, Zoe, since we last interviewed you, there's been a lot of, in the news media, there's been a lot of talk about the mass shooting, a tragic mass shooting that occurred in Uvalde, Texas. Many on the left now, as a result of that shooting, are clamoring for gun control. There are even some that are echoing the calls of the late Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, who essentially called for repealing the Second Amendment in the later days of his life. So, in light of this far left onslaught on the Second Amendment, what do you and Musselwhite intend to do to protect the God-given right to keep and bear arms of South Carolinians?
Yeah, it's interesting that we're at this particular impasse in America, especially since I'm running for office, and being that 2A4 Today is a program that I host where we just talk about all things that threaten, protect, and violate our God-given rights, like you just elucidated. But the idea is that it's amazing to me that we are actually discussing the concept of repealing an amendment, and it being the Second Amendment, because I think we've departed so far from reality, and I just talked about this with Paul Dragu. We departed so far from reality that we're going to do things that don't make any sense. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Let me give you an example. I was just at the NRA event in Houston, Texas, and I polled protesters, and I did it for the show. You can watch the protesters on the newamerican.com. You can go there, you'll see it. But I just polled them, and they're so far departed from reality, they don't understand that in all the wars that America has been in, 240-something years of existence, there's been about 1.5 million lives that were taken, right? 1.5 million people have died in wars. However, since 1973, I think it was 73 when abortion was, made legal by way of the judiciary, we've had 63 million babies murdered. And they're out there protesting because they're saying our babies are dying. You're fighting us and our babies are dying. What are you talking about? Abortion is more effective at killing children than war. What are you even arguing? And so it's really kind of they're so far departed from reality, they can't see even their own hypocrisy. The facts don't matter. It's illogical. None of the things that they're doing really are in order to try to solve the crime of violence. It's just going to determine who can be violent against who. It's just determining who the victim's going to be. And they want to have good, law-abiding people be the victims of violent crime, because the only thing that gun control laws do is make lawful, law-abiding citizens who legally own arms more vulnerable and more insecure.
Now, I know that you're running for lieutenant governor, and Musselwhite is running for governor on the same ticket. You're both running on the same ticket. But on the U.S. Senate side, representing South Carolina, you have Senator Lindsey Graham, who is working reportedly working with Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, I believe, on red flag legislation. Now, in the U.S. Senate, the Democrats, at least the far left Democrats, have not been able to get a lot of what they've wanted, a lot of the hardcore far left agenda, because they've had an impasse of not having enough senators to break the threshold needed. Mainly Senator, oh boy, why is his name escaping me? I'll have to edit this.
Manchin.
Senator Manchin, thank you. Namely, Senator Manchin and Senator Kristen Sinema of Arizona have sort of been a roadblock for the left, ironically, considering that they're leftists anyway. Now, with these reports that there are Republican U.S. senators like Lindsey Graham working to pass these red flag laws. Of course, we don't know the details of them, but suppose, hypothetically, the Senate passes something with some Republican support. It gets passed in the House. Biden signs it into law. And let's say at this point, Musselwhite and yourself are in the governor's mansion there in Columbia, South Carolina. What would you do to prevent or shield South Carolinians from the federal assault on the Second Amendment?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, and you asked me this in the first question, what will we do to protect the God-given liberties of Americans in South Carolina? And I didn't answer it because I wanted to talk to the other thing. But the answer is we already got a law in South Carolina that's passed that gives the Attorney General the ability to challenge unconstitutional things. And in the meantime, none of our law enforcement resources will be used to enforce federal decrees that we discern, that we perceive are a violation of the Constitution. I don't really necessarily think we needed to have the law written to that effect, because I think that's what the executive branch is supposed to be anyway. I consider the executive branch, the law enforcement branch of the state, to be the chief law enforcement officers. And so that means, same way if you get Christian sees Zoe is going to break the law, and he's like, Officer Caden, Zoe's going to break the law. Then Officer Caden would watch Zoe, and if he saw Zoe do something he thought was a violation of law, he would arrest Zoe. He would Mirandize Zoe, put handcuffs on Zoe. The executive branch, the law enforcement branch of South Carolina, is supposed to do the same thing to protect South Carolinians from federal tyranny. That doesn't mean that they're saying that the federal government's guilty, but they're saying that, listen, we're just going to stop you here with this executive order. That's the handcuffs. We'll let the courts figure out whether or not you're innocent or guilty, but you're going to stop right now because it looks like you're violating the covenant that we made, the Constitution. You're violating our contract. So therefore, you need to stop now. But generally our law enforcement branch here in South Carolina, the executive branch, thinks the judge is the law enforcement officer. He thinks that you hire a lawyer and there is your deputy. But that's not how it's supposed to work. We have a system that's designed essentially just to allow our executives to push the blame off and responsibility off on others and not do the job that we've given them to do, which is protect our life, liberty, and property.
Now, another tool that the Founding Fathers gave members of the state legislature as a tool to push back against federal tyranny is the concept of nullification, which is based in the 6th article of the Constitution, which essentially, at least the important part of Article 6 states that only those laws which are made in pursuance of the Constitution are the supreme law in the land, implying that any laws that are not passed in pursuance of the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment, those laws would not be are not considered supreme law of the land. So again, if something is passed by the federal government and they're trying to impose it in South Carolina, where do you and Musselwhite stand on the legislature of the state passing a strong nullification bill that says that act has no bearing in the state of South Carolina, even though our own senator maybe participated in the writing of that legislation, it will have no bearing in this state. Would you and Musselwhite sign or support nullification legislation of that kind?
Without equivocation. We would celebrate the legislators that championed it. We would put them on a horse, give them a robe that the king has worn and a crown, and parade them around town. Okay. The king delights to honor men like that. Okay. I'm not trying to say that we're going to, rule like authoritarian kings. However, we are benevolent. And I do consider that if we live in a self-governing nation, then we are kings in our domain, and we partner together to protect our domains, our community. But, we would absolutely honor all the all the legislators that pursued that kind of course of action. We love it. That's the way it's supposed to work. The national government is not our overlord. They are not issuing decrees in violation of the contract, the Constitution, our covenant, and that means that it just has to be done. That's not the way it works. That's not the way that the government was designed to work. And if we allow it to continue like that, we're just going to experience total government eventually. So we have to say enough's enough, and we will do that.
Now, a little less than a year ago, on August 14, 2021, Governor Henry McMaster signed the Open Carry with Training Act into law. Now, your campaign website, votetruckerbob.com, states right on the homepage, real constitutional carry. How does your and Musselwhite's position of real constitutional carry differ from the bill that Governor McMaster signed into law back in 2021?
Well, I have spoken with legislators in multiple states, Alabama, even Representative Stringer, and the idea that we need to prevent somebody who can legally own a weapon from actually purchasing a weapon is asinine. If you can legally own a weapon, a firearm in South Carolina, I say a weapon because, if we're going to try to stop people from buying knives and hammers and maces and swords, it's ridiculous. Trying to prevent law-abiding citizens who can legally own a firearm from getting a firearm, it only serves to make those people who are good more vulnerable. Thomas Jefferson said it clearly. You can look that up. It's the reality that those kinds of laws only affect good people because good people follow the law. Bad people do not. There's no law that I can make that's going to make a criminal abide it. The only thing I can do with a criminal is put them in a pen, punish them, prevent them somehow. And the best punishment and prevention method that I know of is an armed citizenry. And so the more good people we have that are armed and trained and working together, that are not, trigger happy and crazy because they're very, very familiar with their firearm, they're very well trained, they're working together, the better. And so I'm a proponent of constitutional carry, and I want to go a step further. I want our counties to begin training the citizens. Why not? Why aren't the deputies not having just community action teams where they go play basketball with some troubled kids? But why don't they go out and train every voting precinct in a 100-house area how to clean their weapon, disassemble the weapon, how do you operate in teams? How do you communicate between the precincts? If the poop hits the fan, how are we going to have this, communication? Because obviously it's not enough to just have self-defense. We need to have community defense, because if you know how to defend yourself, that doesn't mean you know what not to shoot at. It doesn't mean you know how to determine if the background is such that you should actually fire your weapon. We'll have people dying from friendly fire. We need to have a community that's not only armed, but trained. And the more armed people, an armed society is a polite society. That's just the way it is. You don't find criminals running into, the police evidence room to steal drugs and guns and money because it's surrounded by people with firearms. They don't run into the police station and do mass shootings. They don't go into the NBA facilities because they're surrounded by armed people.
Absolutely. And armed citizenry is the greatest safeguard for liberty in any nation. And of course, we've seen tyranny rise and come to power and gain a foothold and even flourish in societies where people's ability to own and purchase and branded firearm has been restricted or altogether taken away. Well, of course, thank you so much for your time here being on The New American. And also, we wish you the best of luck in your campaign and God's provision, more than even luck, on June 14th, which I believe is the date of the primary there in South Carolina. So God bless you, Zoe. God bless Musselwhite as well. Take care, and hopefully we'll hear some good news out of the South Carolina primaries. Take care.